I was in the military, I was in the Air Force, and after I got out, I came back, I worked in the supermarket for a while, and then I ended up working for the state in a correctional facility. I started out working there, running a store, believe it or not, a little store that they had. And then I went back to school, took some courses in English literature, and I really got off into some of that kind of stuff, and led me to also to thinking about critical thinking skills, and then I took a comparative religion course, and that really got me really thinking about it. It was amazing. It was a really good course, and to me the big message was, when you look at comparative religion, was how similar they are. How almost every religion, there's a connection, even if you go back to some really ancient physical world, kind of the way that people looked at before the organized religion, but it all seems to be connected. And I had an instructor who was really frustrated with me about that, and we went round and round, because she really felt that her particular religion and Christianity were pretty much where it was, and how dare anyone think that anything else might have equal standing. And so we had some pretty heated. It was an Empire State College, so it's a mentor kind of thing. So it's a different relationship with an instructor than maybe at a regular school. Anyway, we had some pretty heated arguments. I actually passed the course though, so that was good.
So it's good to pass.
But the good thing that she helped me with was, because I was thinking everything is good and everything is the same, of course she pointed out some of the issues around in some of the Eastern religions, different ways that maybe women are treated in some of them than men, and all the inequalities of that. So, and I kind of talked to her about some of the things that I had observed around Christianity, like if you ever are walking past a Christian church when it's letting out and people are going home, you really don't want to step in front of that parking lot, because you're taking your life in your hands, because they're going home. Well, I got a degree in counseling, became a drug counselor in correctional facilities, and worked there for a while, and eventually moved from the prison system to alcohol and substance abuse in Albany. So, and that's where I ended up my career, working with providing services for veterans. So that's kind of my history along work-life stuff. There's a real connection with the Quakers to the prison system, so I felt it's a very unusual world, and I guess one of the people that I worked with, one of the prisoners there, told me when I was leaving. He said to me, he says, I'm glad to see you go. He said, this is not a healthy place for anybody. So, and I think that's true. And people suffer who work in prisons, not as much as the ones that live there, but it isn't a healthy environment for anyone. So anyway, but the one thing it did for me is it kind of did help me kind of go back and start looking at my spirituality a little bit myself. So after the comparative religion, I kind of started looking around again, and I had some history with Quakers. My family come from kind of Quaker background, my dad's family anyway, and so I started going to different meetings, and I really went to a lot of Quaker meetings in the area. I lived in Amsterdam at the time, and I probably went to every Quaker meeting from Bennington to, I don't know, somewhere Quaker Street or up in the Adirondacks. I went to a lot of different meetings. I had a hard time finding a place that I felt comfortable with, and I kind of ended up settling around Albany. And I got to know some folks there, and felt kind of fairly comfortable there. And then somebody kind of coerced me, or not coerced me, but talked me into the Alternatives to the Violence Project to go to a training for that. And so I actually did, if anybody's familiar with Alternatives to Violence, there's different levels of training. So you go to the first one, and then there's a second one, and like the third one, I think. And so, so I went through those courses, and I happened to go to them at Oakwood School, which was where my grandfather had been the head of school there for most of his adult life. So, so while I was there, we were doing all the classes. We were there all day long, you know, for the whole weekend, and we were there, and these were in the library. So, you know, my grandfather's pictures on the wall, and you know, and all this kind of stuff. So I was really having this thing about family and Quakers and all that. And it really connected me. It's funny how all these things work in your life. Connected me and started me thinking about my dad, who was then was actually in a nursing home in Easton, and we had not been connected at all most of his life and most of my life. So I started visiting him, and we went over and over. We had these wonderful conversations, and he talked about what it meant to be a Quaker and be involved with that, and he talked about the importance of being convinced Quakers. Birthright Quakers, blah, 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 it doesn't mean anything. You know, you have to be convinced Quaker, that's what has value. So, and we talked about a lot of things, and my dad was an excellent, to me anyway, was an excellent teacher, and because I still to this day, things will come up and I realize he was teaching me something back then and I didn't know it. And I'll say, oh, that's what he meant. So, and I really like that kind of teaching, and I guess that's what drew me to Alternatives to Violence, to do a lot of experiential learning. I really like that, and I really used a lot of it actually in the prisons, where I had a hard time sticking to the curriculum when I was doing my substance abuse courses, because I used to teach people critical thinking skills, and that's what we did a lot in prison, which was nothing about what we were supposed to be talking about. We had a set curriculum about substance abuse that we were supposed to go through. So, but nobody ever watched what you were doing, so you could do whatever you wanted in the prisons. So anyway, where was I? Anyway, it got me back to my dad. It really got me thinking about it. I really felt that I wanted to, become involved with friends again. And so I was really, I went to Albany, but I didn't go if you're doing Alternatives to Violence project, when you do workshops in the prisons, it's a 3-day thing. So you're not available for anything else while you're doing that. So, and so I wasn't at Albany meeting all that much, but it was a nice meeting, and it was kind of noisy. The kids upstairs making a lot of noise during meeting, which I really liked. I thought that was really great. I know some of the folks there thought maybe they should be a little quieter, but I kind of always enjoyed the chaos of hearing the kids up there. When I first came here, I wasn't that enamored with Easton. It was too quiet, I guess, for me. But I didn't want to say anything, but I wanted. If you go to Albany, there's at least when I went there was several people that were there that were what I guess you would call weighty Quakers or something. And when they had something to say, generally, boy, it would really, for me anyway, it would really get to me. I'd say, wow, and I really, every message was seemed to be pretty highly charged. And maybe it was the time of my life that I was there. I don't know. And Easton was much quieter, so it was a little bit harder to get connected. But I guess now I feel very comfortable here. So it's just a matter of time, and I guess if I don't want to talk a lot, and other people don't either, I guess that's okay.
One of the things you touched on, but what things or people influenced your spiritual life? You want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, one is, I have to say, Pat Beadle in Albany, who she kind of was pushing me to get involved with it, because she knew I worked in prisons at the time, and so she kind of got me involved. But seeing her in prison is amazing. When you see these rough criminal types, you know, and all circling around little Pat Beetle, you know, and it just, very special. I guess other people, I really have, not so much lately, but in the past I did some reading of the classics. Like, when I say classics, I'm talking about like Tale of Two Cities, Hunchback, you know, Notre Dame, stuff like that. And I got off for a long time in some of the Russian novels, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, that stuff. And that stuff had a big influence on me. I've always been fascinated by, especially Dostoevsky and all his struggles inside his head with, you know, kind of, I'll say yin and yang, but, you know, what's right, what's good, and what, you know, just very fascinating to me. So I think, I don't know if that influenced me or not, but I think it may have. Also, I have to say my dad and granddad, both of them were really good teachers. And my grandfather, as well as my dad, when we were small at home, my dad would read to us kids. There was 3 of us kids. I have 2 sisters, and we would sit and he would read to us, you know, like once a week. It was always really fun because he was a good storyteller. And I spent some time out in Indiana with my granddad, and we kind of did the same things. Only they would pick out a book, and the 3 of us, my grandfather, grandmother, and myself, would sit there, and we would each read. And I was pretty young then, my reading was terrible, but it didn't matter to them. And I can remember we read books like George Washington Carver, and all the things that he did with peanuts, you know, things like that. So that was the kind of stuff, but it was, I've always enjoyed, you know, literature, and I think that both of them, my dad and granddad, were really instrumental in that. And I guess the only other one, I would say, Martin Luther King. I really connect with some of his speeches and stuff, the things that he's had to say in his life. And I guess working in prisons and working with a lot of minorities, it was helpful to use. I used to, you know, that was the other thing. Instead of substance abuse, I'd have them do his speeches. So, but it was to see people how they could become uplifted by listening to some of that stuff was fascinating. So helped develop a lot of pride, I think, with some of the folks. One other thing I want to say is I do work with bees a little bit, and not as much as I used to because half my hives are not doing well right now. But just in fact, the latest thing that happened with my one hive, I lost a hive when there was honey in the hive, but the bees weren't where the honey was. So I've been going over that in my head, you know, what's the lesson there? You know, here's a hive full of really a lot of supplies in there, but the cluster of bees wasn't in the right place. So I don't know what that. I'm sure there's something to be learned from that, and I'm trying to figure it out. But anyway, that's what happens if you have a hobby, or if you deal with honeybees. Sometimes or I guess almost anything, you try to find something more on what's going on there, try to learn something from it. So I think there's a lesson there. I just haven't figured it out yet.